The rhythmic clicking of the turn signal was the only thing keeping me grounded in reality. It was a sharp, synthetic sound, counting down the seconds until my marriage effectively ended, though my wife, Linda, sat in the passenger seat completely unaware that the clock was ticking. She was too busy checking her reflection in the illuminated vanity mirror, aggressively applying a shade of red lipstick that I knew cost more than the transmission in the car we were driving. The air inside the cabin was thick, stifling not because of the heating system, which was rattling with the effort of fighting the Chicago winter, but because of the unspoken words piling up between the dashboard and the leather seats. "Do I look professional enough?" Linda asked, though it was not really a question. It was a demand for validation. She snapped the visor shut and turned to me, her eyes scanning my profile with a mixture of anxiety and poorly concealed disdain. She smoothed the fabric of her dress, a designer piece she had bought on credit 3 days ago, claiming it was an investment for her career. "You look perfect," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. The traffic on the I-90 was sluggish, a river of red taillights bleeding into the gray dusk. I kept my grip on the steering wheel loose, relaxed. It was a habit from my other life, the one she knew nothing about. In high-stakes negotiations, if you clench your jaw or grip the pen too hard, you lose. Calmness is the most terrifying weapon in the boardroom, and tonight I needed to be terrifying. "You say that like you don't even care," she sighed, turning back to her phone. Her thumbs flew across the screen. I did not need to be a hacker to know who she was texting. The subtle shift in her posture, the way she angled the screen away from me, the slight softening of her lips, it was all from Marcus Stone. My wife was messaging her boss, the CEO of Aura Tech, the man she believed was her ticket to a penthouse lifestyle. "I care, Linda. I care more than you can imagine," I replied softly. The irony tasted metallic in my mouth. I cared about the company because I secretly owned 41% of it through a complex web of shell companies and blind trusts. I cared about the gala tonight because it was not just a party, it was a deadline I'd set months ago. And I cared about her, or at least the memory of who she used to be before the corporate ladder twisted her priorities into unrecognizable shapes. Linda scoffed, looking out the window at the passing skyline. The skyscrapers of Chicago were rising up like jagged teeth made of glass and steel, piercing the low-hanging clouds. "You just do not get it, David. Tonight is make or break. Oratech is on the brink of something massive. Marcus says we are about to secure an investor who is going to change everything. The architect. That is what they call him. Nobody knows who he is, but he's going to pump millions into the firm. If I play my cards right tonight, I could be promoted to vice president of communications." I navigated the car into the exit lane, the tires crunching over a patch of dirty ice. "The architect," I repeated, testing the name on my tongue. It sounded pretentious when spoken aloud, but anonymity was a shield I could not afford to drop. "Sounds like a mysterious figure. Are you sure this Marcus character isn't just selling you a dream?" Linda whipped her head around, her eyes flashing with genuine anger. "Do not start with your jealousy again, David. Just because you are content with whatever this is," she gestured vaguely at me and my 3-year-old jacket at the car of my life, "does not mean I have to be. Marcus is a visionary. He is trying to save the company. He values me. He listens to my ideas." I stayed silent. I knew exactly how much Marcus Stone valued her. I had read the internal emails. I had seen the discrepancies in the departmental budgets. Marcus valued Linda because she was willing to sign off on expense reports that no sane accountant would touch. He was using her signature to siphon funds into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, setting her up as the fall guy for when the inevitable audit hit. That audit was scheduled to begin in exactly 45 minutes. We approached the financial district. The streets here were cleaner, the lights brighter. The Aura Tech Tower loomed ahead, a monolith of blue glass that reflected the city lights. It looked powerful, impenetrable. From the outside, it looked like success. From the inside, looking at the balance sheets I reviewed every morning at 4 a.m. while Linda slept, it was a hollow shell rotting from the executive suite down. Pull over here, Linda said suddenly, her voice sharp. I frowned. The main entrance is 2 blocks up. The valet is there. No, do not go to the main entrance, she insisted, reaching over to grab the steering wheel slightly. Drop me off around the corner. Here, by the side access. Why? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't look at me. She was busy checking her teeth in the side mirror. Because, David, look at this car. It is embarrassing. There are Bentleys and limousines pulling up to the front. I cannot be seen stepping out of a 10-year-old sedan with a dent in the fender. It ruins the image. Marcus needs me to look successful. Success attracts success. I pulled the car over to the curb, the heater humming loudly in the sudden silence. The spot was dark, away from the glare of the street lamps. It was a fitting place for a secret to be kept. So what is the plan? I asked, shifting the gear into park, but keeping the engine running. I park and then I come in? I have my suit in the trunk. Linda froze. She turned to me slowly, as if I had just suggested we streak through the lobby. You're not coming in, David. The air in the car dropped 10 degrees. I looked at her, studying the face I had woken up next to for 5 years. There was no remorse there, only annoyance that I was making this difficult. Linda, it is a gala. Spouses are invited. I checked the invitation. No, she said firmly, unclipping her seatbelt. Technically, spouses are invited, but this is for the inner circle. It is high-stakes networking. Honestly, David, you would not fit in. You would stand there in your cheap suit, holding a drink, looking awkward, and I would have to babysit you all night. I need to focus on Marcus. I need to focus on the architect, if he shows up. I cannot have you dragging me down. Dragging you down, I echoed. The words were simple, but they landed like stones. Yes. Look, just wait in the car, okay? Or go find a diner or something. Just stay out of sight. I will text you when it is over. It might be late. She opened the door, and the biting wind rushed in, swirling around us. She did not kiss me goodbye. She did not even say goodbye. She just stepped out onto the pavement, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete, and slammed the door shut. I watched her walk away. She didn't look back. She adjusted her shawl, straightened her spine, and disappeared around the corner toward the bright lights of the main entrance, walking toward a man who viewed her as a disposable asset, leaving behind the man who could have given her the world if she had just asked for it with kindness instead of ambition. I sat there for a long moment. The silence in the car was absolute, save for the low rumble of the engine. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were steady. No shaking. No tears. It was strange how clarity often comes not with a bang, but with a whisper. I had tested her, and she had failed. It was not a test. I wanted her to fail, but the data was undeniable. I reached in the back seat and grabbed my laptop bag. It was a battered leather satchel, unassuming, much like its owner. I placed it on my lap and opened it. The screen glowed blue, illuminating my face in the darkness of the car. I bypassed the standard login and accessed the secure terminal. System ready. Identity, architect. Access level, unlimited. My fingers hovered over the keys. I wasn't just a freelancer. I was the founder of Helios Capital, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed assets. I had bought into Auratex 6 months ago using a proxy, suspecting foul play in their management. I had wanted to save the company because the technology was brilliant, even if the leadership was corrupt. I had stayed in the shadows to see if the culture could be fixed from the bottom up. But tonight, the observation phase was over. My phone buzzed. It was not Linda. It was a secure line. I answered it, putting the phone to my ear. Go ahead, I said, my voice dropping an octave, shedding the softness of the husband and adopting the steel of the investor. Mr. Harper, the voice on the other end, was clipped professional. It was Julian, my lead forensic accountant. We have flagged the transaction. Marcus Stone just initiated a transfer of $4 million from the R&D budget to a shell corporation in Panama. He labeled it as consulting fees. He is doing it right now, from his phone, presumably at the gala. I watched the red digits on my dashboard clock change. 7:15 p.m. He was bold, I would give him that. Stealing from the company while hosting a party to save it. Does he have a co-signatory? I asked. Yes, Julian replied. The authorization code belongs to Linda Harper. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second. There it was. The final nail. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had allowed herself to be made legally liable for grand larceny. She probably didn't even know what she had signed. Marcus likely slipped a stack of papers under her nose, complimented her dress, and she signed her life away. Freeze the transaction, I commanded. Do not decline it. Just suspend it in the clearinghouse. Let him think it went through. I want him to feel safe for another hour. Understood, Julian said. And sir, the board of directors is assembling in the executive suite. They are expecting the architect to make a remote appearance at 8 p.m. Change of plans, I said, reaching for the door handle. The architect will be there in person. And Julian? Yes, sir. Upload the full dossier on Stone and my wife to the boardroom server. But keep it password protected until I give the voice command. I want to look them in the eye when they see it. I hung up. I shut the laptop and slid it under the seat. I killed the engine. The car went silent and dark. I stepped out into the cold Chicago night. The wind bit at my face, but I didn't feel it. I walked around to the trunk of the car and popped it open. Inside, hanging in a protective travel bag, was a charcoal gray bespoke suit from Savile Row, silk tie, and a pair of shoes that cost more than Marcus Stone's monthly salary. I wasn't going to a diner. I wasn't going to wait in the car. I stripped off my frayed parka right there on the sidewalk. I didn't care who saw. I pulled on the suit jacket, the fabric settling onto my shoulders like armor. I adjusted the cuffs, tightened the knot of my tie in the reflection of the car window, and ran a hand through my hair. The transformation was internal as much as it was external. David, the supportive, overlooked husband, was staying in the car. The man walking away from the curb was someone else entirely. I walked around the corner toward the main entrance. The valet stand was bustling. Expensive cars were lining up. I saw the doormen, intimidating in their long coats. I saw the red velvet rope. I walked straight up the center. Excuse me, sir. One of the security guards stepped in front of me, his hand raised. This is a private event. Invitation only. Couriers and staff use the loading dock. I didn't stop moving. I didn't raise my voice. I simply didn't slow down. I looked him directly in the eyes, holding his gaze with a weight that made him hesitate. Check the list, I said calmly, not breaking stride. The guard blinked, confused by my audacity. Name? I stopped inches from him. I didn't give him my name. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a black titanium card with a gold chip. It had no numbers, only a small, stylized sun logo, the insignia of Helios Capital. Scan it, I said. He looked at the card, then at me, then at his handheld scanner. He swiped the card. The device let out a melodic chime, and the small screen flashed a bright, urgent green. The text on his screen didn't say guest. It said majority shareholder, Priority Alpha. The color drained from the guard's face. He looked at the device again, as if it were broken, and then looked at me with dawn-breaking terror. He stumbled back, unhooking the velvet rope so fast he nearly tripped. My apologies, sir. We were not informed you were arriving in person. Please, right this way. I walked past him, through the revolving glass doors, and into the warmth of the lobby. The sound of string quartets and polite laughter drifted down from the mezzanine. The air smelled of expensive champagne and betrayal. I checked my watch. 7:30 p.m. Linda was upstairs, likely clinging to Marcus's arm, laughing at a joke that wasn't funny, thinking she had successfully left her baggage on the curb. She had no idea that the baggage had just walked through the front door, and I had brought the receipt for everything. I headed for the elevators, bypassing the crowd. I pressed the button for the penthouse. As the door slid shut, cutting off the noise of the lobby, I caught my reflection in the polished steel of the elevator walls. I looked calm. I looked ready. The ascent began. The numbers on the display climbed higher, counting up the floors. With every passing floor, the pressure built. Not for me, but for them. They were partying on top of a volcano, and I was the one who controlled the eruption. The elevator dinged softly. The doors opened. I stepped out onto the executive floor. The hallway was lined with artwork I had technically paid for. At the end of the hall, the double mahogany doors to the boardroom were closed. Inside, the future of the company was being discussed. I walked down the hall, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. I could hear voices inside. I heard Marcus's booming, confident baritone. "Gentlemen," he was saying, "I assure you, the restructuring is painful but necessary. And with the new capital from the architect, Oratech will dominate the market by Q3. I reached the doors. I didn't knock. I didn't wait to be announced. I placed both hands on the heavy brass handles. "Wait in the car," she had said. I pushed the doors open. The heavy mahogany doors swung inward on silent, well-oiled hinges, revealing a world that operated on a frequency entirely different from the frozen street corner I had just left. If the car had been a cold purgatory of unspoken resentments, the executive foyer of Oratech was a glittering hell of manufactured warmth. The rush of air that hit me was scented with fresh lilies, expensive cologne, and the metallic tang of ambition. It was the smell of money being spent to hide the fact that there was no money left. I stepped across the threshold, the soles of my shoes making no sound on the thick, hand-woven carpet that stretched down the corridor like a tongue rolling out for royalty. This was the glass labyrinth, as the industry insiders called it, the penthouse-level design to disorient and impress in equal measure. Walls of floor-to-ceiling glass offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, turning the city lights into a backdrop for the egos inside. From this height, the people down on the street were invisible, reduced to data points and traffic patterns. It was easy to see how Marcus Stone had lost his way up here. The altitude made you dizzy. It made you forget that gravity always wins in the end. I adjusted my cufflinks, feeling the cool reassure of the gold against my wrist. I was not David Harper, the struggling analyst, anymore. I was an entity. I was a force of nature wrapped in bespoke wool. I moved further into the space, my eyes scanning the room with the precision of a predator assessing a herd. The foyer was crowded. This was the pre-meeting mixer, a tactical gathering where alliances were forged over crystal flutes of sparkling wine before the real butchery began in the boardroom. The air buzzed with a low hum of polite conversation, a drone of networking buzzwords and feigned laughter. I saw faces I recognized from financial magazines and glossy business profiles. There was the vice president of sales, a man whose smile was too wide and whose eyes were too darting. There was the chief financial officer, looking pale and sweating slightly despite the climate control, clearly aware of the storm that was coming. And then I saw them. They were standing near a sculpture of twisted steel that probably cost more than my parents' house. Marcus Stone and Linda. They looked like a power couple from a magazine spread, perfectly lit by the recessed halogens. Marcus was tall, his hair silvered at the temples in a way that suggested wisdom he did not possess. He wore a tuxedo that screamed excess, holding court with a group of sycophantic junior executives who hung on his every word. Linda stood at his side, not quite touching him, but the magnetic pull between them was undeniable. She was radiant. She was laughing at something he had said, her head tilted back, her neck exposed, a picture of adoration. It was a laugh I hadn't heard in years, genuine, unburdened light. She used to laugh like that with me, back when we were eating takeout noodles on the floor of our first apartment. Now, she reserved that joy for a man who was using her signature to rob a pension fund. I stopped moving. I became a statue in the middle of the flowing crowd. A waiter with a silver tray swerved to avoid me, murmuring an apology that I didn't hear. I just watched. I needed to see this. I needed to burn this image into my retinas so that when the time came to sign the papers, my hand wouldn't shake. Linda looked confident. She looked like she belonged here, amidst the crystal and the lies. She was playing the part of the sophisticated corporate insider perfectly, unaware that the stage was rotting beneath her feet. She whispered something to Marcus, and he leaned down, a smirk playing on his lips. The intimacy of the gesture was a physical blow, a sharp impact in the center of my chest, but I converted the pain into fuel. Cold, efficient fuel. I started walking again. My trajectory was not toward the bar or the view. I was walking a straight line toward the double doors at the far end of the foyer, the entrance to the boardroom. To get there, I had to pass them. It took a moment for the ripple effect to start. As I moved through the crowd, people turned. It wasn't because they recognized me. My face was unknown to them, but because of the way I walked. I didn't meander. I didn't look for validation. I walked with the absolute authority of ownership. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing a disruption in the social hierarchy. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Marcus was too absorbed in his own monologue to notice the shift in the room's energy, but Linda, ever the social barometer, felt it. She glanced up, her eyes scanning the room to see who had entered. Her gaze swept over the crowd, indifferent at first, and then it landed on me. For a second, there was no recognition. In her mind, David was sitting in a freezing car 3 blocks away, wearing a worn-out parka. The man approaching her was wearing a suit that fit like a second skin, walking with a predatory grace. Her brain struggled to reconcile the two images. Then the realization hit. I saw the color drain from her face in real time. Her glass of champagne tilted dangerously in her hand. Her eyes widened, not with happiness, but with pure, unadulterated horror. She excused herself from the circle with a frantic, jerky movement and rushed toward me, intercepting me before I could reach Marcus. She moved fast, her heels clicking rapidly on the marble floor of the corridor that connected the foyer to the inner sanctum. She blocked my path, her hands fluttering nervously, creating a physical barrier between me and her lover. "David," she hissed, her voice a strangled whisper that barely carried over the ambient music. "What are you doing? Are you insane?" I stopped, looking down at her. Up close, I could see the cracks in the porcelain. The heavy makeup couldn't hide the strain around her eyes. She smelled of the same perfume I had bought her for our anniversary, a scent that now made my stomach turn. "Hello, Linda," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. It unnerved her more than shouting would have. You need to leave. Now." Her eyes darted around the room, checking to see if anyone was watching. Panic was rising in her voice. "I told you to wait in the car. You cannot be here. Look at you. Where did you get that suit? Did you rent it? Oh my God. David, this is not a costume party. These are serious people. It is a nice suit, isn't it?" I asked, smoothing the lapel. "Italian. Custom. Not a rental." "I do not care," she snapped, grabbing my arm and trying to steer me toward the elevators. Her grip was strong, fueled by desperation. "You're going to ruin everything. Marcus is about to make the biggest announcement of his career. If he sees you here, if he sees me with you, he will think I am unprofessional. He will think I cannot control my personal life." "Control," I repeated, planting my feet. She couldn't move me. I was an anchor. "Is that what I am to you, Linda? A variable to be controlled? A mess to be cleaned up?" "Stop it," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Not here. Not now. Please, David. If you have ever loved me, just turn around and walk away. I will explain everything later. I promise. We can go to that restaurant you like next week. Just go." She was bargaining, offering me scraps of affection in exchange for my disappearance. It was pathetic. It was tragic. "I am afraid I cannot do that," I said gently. "I have a meeting." "A meeting?" She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "With who? The janitorial staff?" "David, do not be delusional. You are a freelance analyst. You fix spreadsheets for startups. You do not have meetings on the executive floor of Aura Tech. Things change," I said. "Roles change." "Nothing has changed," she whispered furiously. "You are still you, and I am still me in this." She gestured to the room. "This is my world. You are trembling, David. You are out of your depth." I wasn't trembling. She was projecting. "Linda," a deep voice boomed from behind her. She froze. We both looked up. Marcus Stone had wandered over, his curiosity piqued by his lover's distress. Up close, He looked even more manufactured. His tan was too orange, his teeth too white. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch, swaying slightly. "Is there a problem here?" Marcus asked, looking at me with the polite disdain one reserves for a gatecrasher. Security is usually better at filtering the riffraff. Linda spun around, forcing a bright, brittle smile. "No, no problem, Marcus. This is just my husband." She said the word husband like it was a diagnosis of a terminal illness. "He was just leaving. He got confused about where to pick me up. He's going back to the car right now." Marcus looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my suit. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. He knew quality when he saw it, but his arrogance quickly smoothed it over. "Ah, the husband," Marcus said, a smirk spreading across his face. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "Linda talks about you. The freelancer, right? Tough market out there. Good of you to drive her tonight. We appreciate the support staff." He chuckled at his own joke. Linda let out a nervous, high-pitched giggle, desperate to keep the mood light. "He is leaving," Linda repeated, looking at me with pleading eyes. "Right, David." I looked at Marcus. I looked at the man who was stealing my money and my wife. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger I expected wasn't there. Instead, there was only the cold precision of a surgeon standing over a patient with gangrene. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "I am not leaving, and I am not support staff." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Well, buddy, unless you are here to refill the ice buckets, you are in the wrong room. This is a closed session. Board members and key stakeholders only." "I'm aware," I said. Marcus sighed, an exaggerated sound of boredom. He turned to Linda. "Honey, handle this. It is embarrassing. If he is not gone in 30 seconds, I am calling security and having him thrown out. It won't look good on your performance review." He turned his back on me, dismissing me entirely. A fatal error. "Marcus," I said. I didn't shout, but the tone of my voice made him stop. It was the tone of a man calling a dog to heel. He turned back slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, you might want to check your phone," I said. "I believe your bank is trying to reach you." Marcus frowned. "What are you talking about?" "The transfer," I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. "For $1 million. To the Panama Shell Company." It stalled. The silence that fell between the three of us was absolute. The background noise of the party seemed to fade away. Linda looked from me to Marcus, confusion warring with fear. Marcus went still, his glass halfway to his mouth. "How do you know about that?" Marcus whispered, his voice losing its theatrical boom. "Who are you?" "David." Linda interjected, grabbing my lapel. "What are you saying? You have been hacking my laptop again?" "Marcus, ignore him. He is just jealous. He makes up stories." "It is not a story, Linda," I said, removing her hand from my jacket. "And I did not hack your laptop. I own the server it connects to." Before Marcus could respond, the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged. A group of 4 men and women walked out. They were not party guests. They wore severe dark suits, carried leather briefcases, and walked with the grim purpose of executioners. Leading them was Arthur Sterling, the general counsel of Oratech, the company's top lawyer. Beside him was the head of security, a massive man named Mr. Black, who usually only moved when there was a physical threat to the CEO. Linda saw them and let out a sigh of relief. She thought Marcus had summoned them. "Thank God," she breathed. "Arthur, Mr. Black, over here. Please, remove this man. He is harassing Mr. Stone. He is trespassing." She pointed a manicured finger at me, her face twisted in a mask of righteous indignation. She was so sure. She was so confident that the system was built to protect her. The group approached us. They didn't look at Linda. They didn't look at Marcus. Their eyes were fixed on me. Marcus, sensing something was wrong, tried to regain control. "Arthur, good timing. Get this clown out of here. He is making wild accusations and disturbing the peace." Arthur Sterling stopped 3 feet in front of me. He was a man of 60, with eyes like flint, He looked at Marcus, then at Linda, and finally, he turned to me. He didn't reach for handcuffs. He didn't point to the exit. He bowed. It was a slight bow, respectful, deferential. The kind of gesture reserved for kings or the people who sign the paychecks of kings. "Mr. Harper," Arthur said, his voice clear and respectful. "Welcome. We have been expecting you. The boardroom is prepped. The files you requested have been decrypted and are ready for presentation." The world stopped spinning for Linda. She looked at Arthur, then at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Mr. Harper?" she squeaked. "Arthur, what are you doing? This is David, my husband. He's a nobody. Why are you bowing to him?" Mr. Black, the security chief, stepped forward. He ignored Linda completely and spoke to me. "Sir, we have secured the perimeter as per your instructions. The external feeds are cut. The room is sealed. We are ready for the audit." "Audit?" Marcus choked out the word. He looked suddenly very small in his tuxedo. "What audit? I'm the CEO. I did not authorize an audit." I stepped forward, closing the distance between myself and Marcus. I was no longer the passenger. I was the driver. "You did not authorize it, Marcus," I said softly. "The owner did." "The owner?" Marcus stammered. "The architect? Is he here? Where is he?" I let the silence hang for a moment, savoring the sweetness of it. I looked at Linda, whose eyes were wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. She looked at the suit. She looked at the deference of the staff. She looked at the man she had told to wait in the car. "Hello, Marcus," I said. "Hello, Linda. I believe we have a meeting to attend." I turned to Arthur. "Shall we?" "Right this way, sir," Arthur said, gesturing toward the boardroom doors. I began to walk. "Wait!" Linda screamed, finding her voice. She grabbed my arm again, but this time Mr. Black stepped in. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a wall of muscle that forced her back. "David," she cried, her voice cracking. "What is going on? Tell me. You're the architect? That is impossible. We have a mortgage. We drive a Toyota. You cannot be him." I stopped and looked back at her over my shoulder. "I like the Toyota," I said, "and the mortgage was a test. One you failed." "But why?" she whispered, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. Tears of fear, not sorrow. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," I said, "I wanted to see who you were when you thought no one was watching. And now I know." I turned away from her stunned face. "Bring them," I said to Mr. Black. "They are required for the session." "No, I'm not going in there," Marcus yelled, panic finally taking over. He turned to run toward the elevators. "Mr. Stone," Mr. Black said, his voice dropping to a gravelly rumble. "The elevators are locked down. The stairwells are secured. The only way out of this building is through that boardroom." Two security guards appeared from the shadows of the hallway, flanking Marcus. He looked trapped. He looked like a rat realizing the maze had no exit. "This is kidnapping," Marcus shouted. "No." Arthur Sterling corrected him calmly, checking his watch. "This is a mandatory emergency board meeting called by the majority shareholder. Attendance is compulsory under the company bylaws you signed 3 years ago. Clause 14, Section B." I reached the double doors of the boardroom. Unlike the entrance to the foyer, these doors were formidable, soundproofed, heavy. They were the gates to the inner sanctum. I pushed them open. The room inside was impressive. A 30-foot table made of black walnut dominated the space. Around it sat the 12 members of the board of directors. They were the titans of industry, men and women who controlled billions. They were murmuring amongst themselves, checking their watches, waiting for the mysterious architect to appear on the video screen. When the doors opened, they all turned. They expected a courier. They expected a waiter. Instead, they saw me. And behind me, they saw their CEO, sweating and pale, being corralled by security. I walked to the head of the table. The chair there was empty. It was the chairman's seat, a position that had been vacant for 6 months. I didn't ask for permission. I pulled the chair out. The leather creaked in the silence. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. I remained standing, placing my hands flat on the polished wood of the table. My name is David Harper, but in these files, I tapped the thick leather folder that Arthur Sterling placed in front of me. I'm listed as the architect. A collective gasp went through the room. One of the board members, an elderly woman named Mrs. Higgins, adjusted her glasses. Mr. Harper? But we were told the architect was an overseas consortium. A necessary fiction, I replied, to observe the health of my investment without interference. And I must say, the diagnosis is terminal. I looked up at the door. Marcus and Linda were being ushered in. Linda was trembling, her face a mask of ruin. Marcus looked like a man walking to the gallows. Sit down, I commanded. There were only 2 empty chairs left. 2 small, uncomfortable chairs set away from the main table, usually reserved for note-takers or junior staff. Marcus hesitated. Mr. Black cleared his throat. Marcus sat. Linda looked at me. Her eyes were begging. She was mouthing the word please. She wanted me to save her. She wanted the husband she had treated like an accessory to step in and fix the mess she had created. I looked right through her. Sit down, Mrs. Harper, I said. The minutes of this meeting will be extensive. She collapsed into the chair, burying her face in her hands. I opened the folder. The sound of the paper turning was the loudest thing in the room. Item number 1. I announced, looking at the board members who were now watching me with rapt attention. The embezzlement of corporate funds by the CEO and the head of communications. I pressed a button on the console built into the table. The massive screen on the far wall flickered to life. It didn't show a spreadsheet. Not yet. It showed a video file. The timestamp was from 20 minutes ago. The angle was from the dashboard of a car parked around the corner. The audio filled the room, crisp and clear. Wait in the car. You would not fit in. Marcus needs me to look successful. Linda's voice, denigrating her husband, plotting her ascent. Then Marcus's voice from a different recording, synced perfectly. We will use the consulting fee to cover the margin call. The architect will never know. He's just a money bag. The faces of the board members turned to stone. They looked from a screen to Marcus and then to Linda. The disgust in the room was palpable. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal. It was about the sheer, arrogant stupidity. I paused the video. I'm a money bag, I said into the silence. And I know everything. I sat down in the chairman's chair. Let us begin. The doors behind us clicked shut, sealing us in. The trap was sprung. The air in the room grew heavy with the weight of consequences. I looked at Linda one last time. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was looking at her hands, specifically at the ring finger where a diamond used to sit, realizing that the symbol of our marriage was now just a piece of metal, and she was the one who had melted it down. The silence in the boardroom was not empty. It was heavy, a physical weight that pressed down on the shoulders of everyone present. It was the kind of silence that follows a thunderclap, the breathless moment where the world waits to see where the lightning has struck. I sat at the head of the table, my hands resting on the cool, polished walnut surface. To my right sat the board of directors, 12 individuals who controlled the flow of millions of dollars. Yet right now, they looked like school children waiting for the principal to speak. To my left, isolated in the 2 chairs usually reserved for stenographers or assistants, sat Marcus Stone and my wife, Linda. The air conditioning hummed a low, monotonous note, cycling the filtered air through the room. It was the only sound. No one dared to click a pen. No one dared to sip their water. The video screen behind me, which I had activated moments ago, glowed with a static blue light, waiting for my command. I looked at the faces around the table. I knew them all, though they did not know me. I had studied their dossiers for months. There was Elias Thorne, the banking tycoon with a penchant for risk aversion, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. Beside him sat Victoria Graham, a woman who had made her fortune in logistics and had zero tolerance for inefficiency. She was looking at Marcus with a mixture of confusion and dawning suspicion. Mr. Harper, Elias Thorne broke the silence, his voice trembling slightly. You claim to be the architect. That is a significant statement. We had been negotiating with the architect's representatives for weeks. We were under the impression he was a silent partner. I turned my gaze to Elias. I didn't blink. Silence is a tool, Mr. Thorne. It allows one to hear things that are usually drowned out by the noise of corporate self-congratulation. But there comes a time when silence becomes complicity. Tonight, that time ended. Marcus Stone shifted in his chair. The sweat was beading on his upper lip, visible even under the harsh fluorescent lights. He tried to muster the arrogance that had carried him through his career, the bluster of a man who believed his own press releases. "This is preposterous." Marcus spat, though the volume was lower than usual. "Board members, I apologize for this intrusion. This man is clearly mentally unstable. He is the husband of a junior employee. He is a freelancer who fixes laptops for a living. Security has clearly failed us tonight. Mr. Black, I order you to remove him." Mr. Black, standing like a granite statue by the door, did not move. His eyes remained fixed on the far wall. "Mr. Black answers to the owner of the building and the majority shareholder," I said calmly. "As of this morning, when the final tranche of Class A shares was transferred to Helios Capital, that person is me." I tapped a key on the laptop in front of me. The screen behind me changed. It didn't show a spreadsheet yet. It showed a digital certificate of ownership, a complex document bearing the seal of the Securities and Exchange Commission, time-stamped and notarized. At the bottom, in clear, bold letters, was the name of the holding company, Helios Capital, and directly under it, the name of the managing director, David Harper. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. Linda let out a small, strangled sound. She stared at the screen, her eyes darting back and forth between my name and my face. She looked as if she were trying to solve a math equation in a language she didn't speak. "You," Linda whispered. "You bought the company?" "I saved the company." I corrected her, not looking at her. There is a difference. Buying implies a transaction. Saving implies a rescue operation. And usually when you rescue something, you have to cut away the rot to preserve the healthy tissue. Victoria Graham leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Harper, if you are indeed the architect, then we welcome you. But why the theatrics? Why crash the gala? Why this tribunal?" "Because Mrs. Graham," I said, leaning back in a leather chair, "standard audits are too slow. They look at numbers and columns. They don't see the intent. They don't hear the conversations in the hallways. I needed to see the culture of this organization before I pour my resources into it. And what I found was not just mismanagement. It was theft." Marcus slammed his hand on the armrest of his chair. "I will not sit here and be slandered by nobody. I have led this company for 5 years. I have tripled our brand recognition. You have tripled the marketing budget." I countered, my voice cutting through his outburst like a scalpel. "Brand recognition is useless if the product is non-existent and the coffers are empty." I pressed another key. The screen shifted. The certificate vanished, replaced by a complex web of financial transactions. It looked like a map of a subway system, with lines connecting various accounts. In the center was the Auratech main operating account. Red lines radiated outward to dozens of smaller nodes. "Let us look at the anatomy of a lie," I said, standing up. I walked slowly toward the screen, feeling the eyes of the room tracking me. "Marcus, would you care to explain to the board what Project Icarus is?" Marcus went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "Strange," I said, "because you signed the authorization forms. Project Icarus, a supposed research initiative to develop a new quantum processing chip. A noble goal, very futuristic. The board approved $40 million for it last fiscal year." I pointed to a cluster of data points on the screen. "Here is the money leaving Auratech, and here is where it went. Not to a lab, not to engineers, not to a fabrication plant." I zoomed in on the graphic. The destination was a company called Blue Horizon Consultants. Blue Horizon Consultants I read aloud. Registered in the Cayman Islands. Sole proprietor. I paused for effect, letting the tension build until it was screaming. A shell entity linked to a trust. And the beneficiary of that trust? I clicked the remote. A document appeared. It was a scanned passport photo attached to the trust deed. It was Marcus Stone. The boardroom erupted. Voices overlapped, shouting questions, demanding answers. Elias Thorne looked like he was having a heart attack. Victoria Graham was writing furiously in her notebook. Order, I said. I didn't shout, but the command was absolute. The room quieted down. That is a fabrication. Marcus yelled, standing up. He faked it. He's a hacker. He planted that. Sit down, Marcus, I said. We're just getting started. Mr. Black took a step forward. Marcus sat down. I turned my attention to the second chair. To Linda. She was shrinking. She was trying to make herself as small as physically possible. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was looking at her hands, twisting her wedding ring, the ring I had placed there, around and around. Now, I said, my voice softening, which made it infinitely more dangerous. A CEO cannot embezzle this scale of funds alone. He needs signatures. He needs compliance officers to look the other way. He needs a department head to sign off on the marketing expenses for these phantom projects. I looked at Linda. Mrs. Harper, or should I call you by your maiden name? You seem to prefer it on your professional social media profiles. Linda looked up. Her eyes were wet, red-rimmed. She looked terrified, but beneath the fear, I saw the confusion. She still didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening. She thought this was a marital spat that had spilled over into the office. She didn't realize she was standing on a trapdoor. David, please, she whispered. This is too much. Can we just go home? Please. I'll explain. I'll quit. To stop this. Go home, I asked. To the house you told me was suffocating? To the life you described to your friends as settling? I never said that, she lied. We will get to what you said. I promised. But first, let's look at what you signed. I changed the slide. Displayed on the 20-foot screen was an invoice. It was for strategic brand alignment for Project Icarus. The amount was $4 million. This invoice was processed 45 minutes ago, I told the board, while the gala was starting downstairs, while the champagne was pouring. This money was moved from the employee pension fund into the Blue Horizon account. The board members gasped again. The pension fund? Elias Thorne asked, horrified. That is federal territory. That is prison. Correct, I said. And look at the authorization signature. I zoomed in. There in digital ink was the signature I knew better than my own. Linda Harper. I didn't know. Linda cried out, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. He told me it was a transfer for the venue. He told me it was for the catering and the event planners. I didn't read the account numbers. I just signed what he gave me. Negligence is not a defense against fraud. Linda, I said, you are the head of communications. You have a fiduciary duty, and you signed a document transferring $4 million of your colleagues' retirement money into your lover's offshore account. The word lover hung in the air. The board members looked at Linda with a new expression. It wasn't just professional disdain anymore. It was personal disgust. Corporate theft was one thing. Sleeping with the boss to facilitate, it was a cliché that offended their sensibilities. Linda stammered. We aren't. It's not like that. Do not lie to me, I said. Not here. Not now. Lying insults my intelligence and wastes the board's time. I walked back to the head of the table and sat down. I felt a profound weariness. This wasn't a triumph. It was an autopsy of my marriage. You told me to wait in the car, I said quietly, addressing her directly for the first time as a husband, not a chairman. You said I wouldn't fit in. You said I was an embarrassment. I looked at her, really looked at her. You were right, Linda. I don't fit in. I don't fit into a world where value is determined by the price of a suit or the title on a business card. I don't fit into a world where loyalty is a currency to be traded for a promotion. David, I love you, she sobbed. I was just stressed. I wanted us to succeed. I did it for us, For us. I repeated. Let's test that hypothesis. I nodded to Arthur Sterling. The lawyer tapped his tablet. Audio filled the room. It was the recording from the car, captured by the high-fidelity microphone in the dashcam system I had installed for security, a system Linda knew nothing about because she never cared to ask about the old junk car. Voice of Marcus. Are you sure he won't suspect anything? Voice of Linda. David? Please. He's clueless. He lives in his own little world. As long as I bring home a paycheck, he's happy. He has no ambition. Marcus. It's pathetic, really. Once this deal goes through and I get my bonus, I'm filing the papers. I can't be anchored to a sinking ship anymore. Voice of Marcus. Good girl. We'll celebrate in St. Tropez. Just keep him quiet tonight. Voice of Linda. I told him to wait in the car. Like a dog. He actually listened. The recording ended. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was absolute zero. It was the vacuum of space where no life can survive. Linda was frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She stared at the table, her face a mask of total shock. She had been stripped bare. Her private malice, her secret disdain, her calculated betrayal. It was all out in the open, played back in high-definition surround sound for the most powerful people in her industry to hear. Marcus looked defeated. He slumped in his chair, realizing that his golden parachute had just been set on fire. Like a dog, I repeated softly. I turned to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, you have seen the financial records. You have heard the admission of conspiracy. You have seen the evidence of gross misconduct, embezzlement, and fraud. I placed my hands on the table. I propose a motion, I said. Effective immediately, Marcus Stone is relieved of his duties as CEO for cause. All his stock options are clawed back under the bad actor clause of his contract. And Linda Harper is terminated for violation of corporate ethics and complicity in financial crimes. Seconded. Victoria Graham shouted, almost leaping out of her chair. Thirded. Elias Thorne added grimly. All in favor? I asked. Every hand in the room went up. 12 hands. The motion carries, I said. Mr. Black, the security chief, stepped forward. He didn't pull a gun. He didn't need to. He simply gestured to the door. 2 more guards entered, carrying cardboard boxes, the universal symbol of corporate eviction. Please escort Mr. Stone and Mrs. Harper to their offices to collect their personal effects, Mr. Black said. You have 10 minutes. After that, you will be escorted from the building. Any attempt to access a computer or a file will be met with immediate restraint. Marcus stood up slowly. He looked at me, his eyes full of hate. You think you've won? He sneered. You're just a sad little man with a lot of money. She cheated on you because you're boring. You can buy the company, but you can't buy respect. I don't need to buy respect, Marcus, I said, meeting his gaze. I earn it, something you never learned to do. And as for the money, you're right. Money doesn't solve everything, but it does hire excellent lawyers. And yours will need to be miraculous to keep you out of federal prison. Marcus flinched. The reality of the prison time finally hit him. He turned and walked out, his shoulders hunched, a broken man. Linda didn't move. She sat there, staring at me. David, she whispered. Where do I go? You hold the lease on the apartment. You pay for the car. If I lose this job, you should have thought about that before you signed the invoice, I said. And before you decided I was an anchor. I'm your wife, she pleaded. Doesn't that mean anything? I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at the woman I had promised to love and cherish. I still felt love for her, somewhere deep down, buried under layers of ash. But love without trust is just a hostage situation. It means everything, Linda, I said. It means I expected better. It means the betrayal hurts more. And it means that when I divorce you, I won't do it out of malice. I'll do it out of necessity. Because I cannot build a future with someone who is actively trying to demolish my foundation. Please, she cried, tears finally streaming down her face, ruining the makeup she had applied so carefully in the car. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll change. I swear. People don't change in the middle of a board meeting, Linda, I said. They change in the quiet moments when no one is watching. And in those moments, you chose to leave me in the cold. I nodded to Mr. Black. Escort her out. One of the guards gently took Linda by the arm. She resisted for a moment, looking at me, waiting for me to crack, waiting for the nice guy David to surface and rescue her. But that David was gone. He had been left in the parking lot. She let out a sob and allowed herself to be led away. The doors closed behind her with a definitive thud. I was alone with the board. The tension in the room dissipated, replaced by a strange, awkward relief. The cancer had been cut out. The surgery was over. Now came the recovery. "Mr. Harper," Victoria Graham said, breaking the silence. That was difficult to watch, but necessary. "What do we do now? The company is in shambles. Our reputation will be destroyed when this news breaks." I turned back to the screen. I typed a command. The evidence of the fraud vanished, replaced by a new graphic. It was a blueprint, a strategy for a new product line, fully funded, ethically sourced, ready to launch. "Now," I said, looking at the weary faces of the directors, "we rebuild. We don't hide the scandal. We own it. We release a press statement within the hour. We admit the corruption, we announce the leadership change, and we promise total transparency. We show the market that we had the strength to clean our own house." I looked at the empty chair at the end of the table where Marcus had sat. "Oratech has been operating in the dark for too long," I said. "It's time to turn on the lights, even if the glare is painful." I sat down and pulled the agenda toward me. "Next item," I said, my voice steady, my hands no longer shaking, my heart cold but beating with a steady, rhythmic purpose. "Restructuring the pension fund to repay the employees. I will cover the shortfall personally until the assets are recovered from Mr. Stone." The board members nodded. For the first time all night, they weren't looking at a ghost or a mystery. They were looking at a leader. But as we delved into the numbers, a part of my mind was still drifting outside, down 3 flights of stairs to the cold street corner. I wondered if Linda would take a taxi, or if she would stand there waiting, hoping that the car would come around the corner. It wouldn't. The car was parked. The engine was off, and the driver had finally walked away. The meeting continued late into the night. We dissected the budget. We slashed the executive bonuses. We reinstated the research grants. By the time we finished, it was 2 a.m. I stood up, my body aching with fatigue, but my mind clear. "Thank you, everyone," I said. We reconvened at 9. As I walked out of the boardroom, Arthur Sterling fell in a step beside me. "Sir," he said quietly, "the police are downstairs. They have taken Mr. Stone into custody. They are asking for a statement." "And Mrs. Harper?" I asked, keeping my eyes forward. "She was questioned and released pending further investigation," Arthur said. She's sitting in the lobby, sir. She refuses to leave. She says she is waiting for her husband." I stopped. I looked at the elevator doors. I could go down there. I could offer her a ride. I could offer her a hotel room. It would be the kind thing to do. But kindness without boundaries had been my failing. "Tell her," I said, my voice feeling like sandpaper in my throat, "that her husband is not in the building. Tell her that the architect is busy." "Understood," Arthur said. I turned and walked toward the private elevator that led to the helipad. I wasn't going to fly away. I just needed air. I needed to stand on the roof and look at the city without glass in between. I stepped out onto the roof. The wind was fierce, whipping my tie and jacket. The city of Chicago lay spread out below me, a grid of amber and white lights. It was beautiful and cold. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of ozone and winter. I had won. I had saved the company. I had destroyed my enemies. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had one notification, a text from Linda. "Please, just one word." I looked at it for a long time. Then I pressed the side button, turning the screen black. I didn't block her. I didn't delete it. I just put the phone back in my pocket. The silence on the roof was different from the silence in the boardroom. It wasn't heavy. It was vast. It was the silence of a new beginning, terrifying and open. I looked at the horizon, where the first faint hint of gray was touching the sky. The night was ending. The long, cold night was finally over. But the dawn brought no warmth, only the stark, revealing light of the day. And in that light, I would have to build a new life, brick by brick alone. The architect had cleared the site. Now, the real work would begin. The sound of a life collapsing is rarely as dramatic as a building falling down. There is no dust cloud, no screaming sirens, no rumble of concrete shattering against the earth. In the corporate world, the sound of destruction is much quieter. It is the dry, rhythmic scratching of a fountain pen against thick, cotton-bonded paper. It is the soft click of a door latch engaging. It is the hum of a server drive being wiped clean. I sat in a chair that was designed to intimidate. It was a high-backed, leather executive seat positioned at the head of a table made of frosted glass and brushed aluminum. This was not the warm, wood-paneled boardroom of Aura Tech. This was the sterile, surgical environment of Sterling and Associates, the law firm I retained for matters that required absolute precision and zero emotion. The air in the room was scrubbed clean, smelling faintly of lemon polish and expensive cologne. It was a room where dreams came to be dissected and where futures were legally dismantled. It had been 5 days since the gala. 5 days of forensic auditing that felt less like accounting and more like an excavation of a crime scene. What we had found in the wreckage of Marcus Stone's tenure was not just negligence. It was a masterclass in hubris. Arthur Sterling sat to my right. He was a man who seemed to be made of parchment and wire, thin and dry, but possessing a tensile strength that terrified opposing counsel. He arranged a stack of files in front of him with the meticulous care of a surgeon laying out his scalpels. "They are here," Arthur said, glancing at his watch. "They are 5 minutes late. A final power play, perhaps, or merely the disorganization of the desperate." "It is the traffic," I said, staring out the window at the gray Chicago morning. "They don't have a driver anymore." The intercom buzzed. The receptionist's voice was polite, detached. "Mr. Stone and Mrs. Harper have arrived. Shall I send them in?" "Send them," Arthur replied. I didn't turn around when the door opened. I kept my eyes on the city skyline, watching the steam rise from the ventilation units of the surrounding skyscrapers. I wanted them to see my back first. I wanted them to understand that they were no longer facing a husband or a subordinate. They were facing an obstacle. I heard the door open and the shuffling of feet. There was a hesitation, a pause where I could practically feel the tension radiating off them. "Sit," Arthur commanded. I turned slowly. The transformation was striking. 5 days ago, Marcus Stone had been a peacock, strutting in a tuxedo, confident in his untouchability. Today, he wore a suit that looked slightly wrinkled, as if he had slept in it, or perhaps hadn't had the energy to send it to the dry cleaners. His face was gray, the fake tan fading into a sallow yellowness. His eyes were bloodshot. And Linda, my wife, technically, legally, though emotionally that contract had been voided long ago, sat next to him. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She wore a simple gray blouse and slacks. Her hair, usually a helmet of perfect styling, was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked smaller. When her eyes met mine, there was no spark of defiance left. There was only a vast, empty well of fear. She reached for a glass of water on the table. Her hand trembled so violently that the ice cubes clinked against the glass, a tiny, pathetic bell tolling in the silence. "Let's proceed," Marcus said, his voice raspy. "I have my own representation here." He gestured to a man sitting beside him, a young, nervous-looking lawyer who clearly specialized in traffic court rather than high-stakes corporate litigation. It was all Marcus could afford now that his assets were frozen. Arthur Sterling didn't even look at the young lawyer. He opened the first file. "We are here to finalize the separation of assets and the termination of employment for both parties," Arthur began. "This is not a negotiation. This is a notification of terms." Marcus slammed his hand on the table, a shadow of his former bluster. "You can't just fire me. I have a contract. I have a golden parachute clause. If I am terminated without cause, I am owed $12 million. Arthur peered over his spectacles. Termination without cause? Mr. Stone, you seem to be laboring under a significant misunderstanding. You were not terminated without cause. You were terminated for gross misconduct, embezzlement, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Arthur slid a single sheet of paper across the glass table. This is the forensic report on the Blue Horizon accounts. Arthur continued calmly. We have traced every cent. The $4 million from the pension fund. The $2 million from the R&D budget. The kickbacks from the vendor contracts. It is all here. The evidence has already been submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the District Attorney's Office. Marcus stared at the paper. The color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. The District Attorney? Marcus whispered. We are seeking full restitution, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, devoid of the warmth I used to reserve for these people. The company will be made whole. Every dollar you stole will be repaid. I don't have that kind of money, Marcus shouted, panic rising in his voice. I spent it. It's gone. The lifestyle, the cars, the investments. Then we will liquidate your assets, Arthur said, as if discussing the weather. Your penthouse is already in foreclosure. Your vehicles have been repossessed. Your portfolio has been seized. Marcus looked at his young lawyer for help. The lawyer shrugged helplessly. Mr. Stone, if the evidence is this solid, we are looking at criminal charges. The civil repayment is the least of your worries. Marcus slumped back in his chair, putting his head in his hands. The reality was finally setting in. He wasn't just unemployed. He was ruined. I turned my gaze to Linda. She hadn't looked at the papers. She was looking at me. David, she whispered. Her voice was thin, fragile. Please, I didn't know about the shell companies. You know I'm not good with numbers. I just signed what he told me to sign. I was manipulated. Manipulated, I repeated. Yes. She leaned forward, her eyes pleading. He told me he was the genius. He told me he was saving the company. I was just trying to help. I was a victim here too, David. Arthur Sterling cleared his throat. Mrs. Harper, while ignorance is a plea, it is not a defense for a corporate officer. However, we are not here to discuss your criminal liability. That is for the police to determine. We are here to discuss your debts to the company and the dissolution of your marriage. Linda flinched as if she had been slapped. Marriage? David, we can work this out. I made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But we have history. We have a life. You can't just throw 10 years away because of one bad year. I looked at her, studying her face. I tried to find the woman I had married, the woman who used to laugh at my bad jokes and help me with the crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings. But that woman was gone, buried under layers of entitlement and greed. You threw it away. Linda, I said softly. You threw it away the moment you decided I was an accessory to your life rather than a partner. You threw it away when you looked at me in that car and saw a servant instead of a husband. I pushed a document toward her. It was thick, bound in blue paper. The divorce filing, I said. She stared at it, tears welling up in her eyes. David, I don't want a divorce. I love you. I ignored the lie. And this, I said, sliding a second, thinner document across the table, is the breakdown of your financial obligations. She wiped her eyes and looked at the paper. She frowned. What is this? She asked. $300,000? What is this for? Corporate credit card misuse, Arthur explained. You used the company card for personal vacations, wardrobe, jewelry, and dining. Under the terms of your employment contract, personal use of company funds is grounds for immediate repayment. Since you're being terminated for cause, the repayment is due immediately. I don't have $300,000, she stammered. David, you know I don't. Our joint account only has. There's no joint account, I interrupted. She froze. What? I closed the joint account this morning, I said. I withdrew my half. The remaining half, your half, has been frozen by a court order to pay a portion of the debt you owe Oratech. She looked at me with horror. You left me with nothing? I left you with exactly what you earned, I said. But the house. She cried. We can sell the house. The equity. The house belongs to a trust. Arthur interjected smoothly. The Harper Family Trust. The terms of a trust state that the property is for the benefit of Mr. Harper and his direct descendants. In the event of a divorce triggered by infidelity, which we have ample proof of, the spouse's claim to the trust is null and void. You signed this agreement 5 years ago, Mrs. Harper. Linda sat back, her mouth opening and closing. She was processing the magnitude of her error. She had assumed that even if the job failed, she would get half of my assets. She had assumed that the house, the car, the savings were common property. She had never bothered to read the fine print of the life I had built for us. So I'm homeless? She whispered. You have 30 days to vacate the premises, I said. That is more generosity than you showed me when you left me on the curb. She looked at Marcus. He was useless to her now, a broken man staring at the table. She looked at me. I was a wall of ice. David, please, she sobbed, the tears flowing freely now. I have nowhere to go. My parents won't take me in. My friends, they were all from the company. They won't talk to me now. That is an unfortunate consequence of your social strategy, I said. You invested in people who valued your title, not your character. When the title is gone, so are the people. I stood up. The movement signaled the end of the meeting. The terms are non-negotiable, I said. Sign the papers. Surrender your company devices. Return the keys to the vehicle. Linda stood up too, her legs shaking. She reached out, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away. David, look at me. She screamed, her composure shattering completely. I am your wife. Doesn't that mean anything? How can you be so cruel? You are acting like a monster. I stopped at the door. I turned back one last time. I'm not a monster, Linda, I said. I am the architect. And when a building is structurally unsound, when the foundation is rotten, you don't patch it up. You condemn it. You're the one who poured the poison into the concrete. I'm just the one signing the demolition order. I walked out of the room. The hallway was long and quiet. I walked toward the elevators, Arthur Sterling keeping pace beside me. That went as expected, Arthur noted dryly. Yes, I said. I pressed the call button for the elevator. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was the absence of weight. For years, I had been carrying Linda, carrying her insecurities, her demands, her need for validation. I had been carrying the secret of my success, hiding it to protect her ego. Now the weight was gone. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. As the doors began to close, I saw the door to the conference room open. Linda stumbled out into the hallway. She looked wild, desperate. She saw me in the elevator. She started running down the hall. David, wait, wait. She was running toward me, just as I had waited for her so many times. But this time, the gears of the elevator were already engaged. The doors slid shut, cutting off her voice, cutting off her image, cutting off the past. The elevator began its descent. I watched the numbers count down. 30, 29, 28. When I reached the lobby, the air was different. The security guard at the desk nodded to me with genuine respect. Good afternoon, Mr. Harper, he said. Good afternoon, I replied. I walked out of the building and into the street. The wind was still cold, but the sun was breaking through the clouds. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from a bank. Transaction complete. Restitution payment processed. I put the phone away. I walked toward the curb. This time, I didn't have to look for a parking spot around the corner. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb the moment I stepped out. The driver, a man I had hired myself, stepped out and opened a rear door. Good afternoon, sir, he said. Where to? I looked back at the building one last time. Up on the 30th floor, 2 people were realizing that the world they thought they owned had just evicted them. Drive, I said, sliding into the warm leather seat. Just drive. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud. The world outside was muted. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The demolition was finished. The sight was clear, but as the car pulled away into the traffic, merging with the flow of the city, I realized that the hardest part wasn't destroying the old life. It was facing the blank page of the new one. I was free, and freedom, I discovered, was a terrifyingly open space. The next few days were a blur of bureaucratic machinery. My life became a series of signatures. I signed the formal termination orders. I signed the press releases that went out to the financial news networks, admitting the internal fraud and outlining the recovery plan. The stock price took a hit, as expected, dipping 15% in the first hour of trading. But then, something interesting happened. By the afternoon of the second day, the stock stabilized. Analysts were praising the swift and decisive action of the new leadership. They called it a cleansing fire. The narrative shifted from Aura Tech in crisis to Aura Tech under new, ethical management. I sat in the CEO's office, my office now, watching the ticker on the screen. The room had been stripped of Marcus's influence. The gaudy art was gone, replaced by simple, abstract pieces. The liquor cabinet was empty. The desk was clear. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, whom I had promoted from the research department because she actually read the reports, knocked on the door frame. "Mr. Harper?" she asked. "Yes, Sarah. There is a visitor in the lobby. She says it is urgent." I didn't have to ask who it was. I knew. "She has been there for 3 hours," Sarah added gently. "Security wants to know if they should remove her." I sighed and rubbed my temples. I had stripped Linda of her job, her home, and her status. But I hadn't stripped her of her persistence. "Let her up," I said, "but tell security to wait outside the door." Sarah nodded and left. 10 minutes later, Linda walked in. She looked worse than she had at the law firm. She was wearing the same clothes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She carried a small cardboard box, the sum total of her career at Aura Tech. She stood in the middle of the room, looking around the office that she had once visited as the mistress of the king. Now, she was a refugee in a foreign land. "Hello, Linda," I said, not rising from my chair. She placed the box on the floor. She didn't cry this time. She looked exhausted, hollowed out. "I came to return the badge," she said, placing her ID card on the edge of my desk. "And the keys." She placed the key fob to the company car next to it. I nodded. "Thank you." She stood there, lingering. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse. "I'm staying in a motel on the interstate," she said quietly. It's not great." I said nothing. I waited. "Marcus left town," she continued. "He took the bus. He said he has a cousin in Ohio. He blamed me, you know. He said if I hadn't been so obvious, you wouldn't have noticed." She let out a dry, bitter laugh. "He called me a liability. After everything I did for him. He was a user." "Linda," I said, "you knew that. You just thought you were the exception." "I know," she whispered. "I know that now." She looked up at me, her eyes searching for something. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe a lifeline. "David, is there any chance?" "Not for us. I know that's over. But, for me, I'm good at my job. I know the media contacts. I can help manage the crisis. I can work from the basement. I'll take a pay cut. I need a job. I need to survive." I looked at her. I saw the desperation. I saw the fear of poverty that she had always despised. "Linda," I said gently, "you committed fraud. You are under investigation by the federal government. I cannot hire you. No reputable company can hire you until your name is cleared, and we both know that won't happen." She flinched. "So that's it. I'm just garbage?" "You're not garbage," I said. "You're a person who made a series of catastrophic choices. And now you have to live the life those choices built." I reached into my drawer and pulled out a checkbook. It was my personal account, not the company's. I wrote a check. I tore it out and slid it across the desk. She looked at it. It was for $5,000. "This is not a settlement," I said, "and it is not a salary. It is a severance from our marriage. It is enough to pay for the motel for a few months. Enough to buy food. Enough to find a lawyer who isn't Shark." She stared at the check. Her hand shook as she reached for it. "Why?" she asked. "After everything I did?" "Because I am not you," I said. She took the check. She held it to her chest like a shield. "Thank you," she whispered. She turned to leave. She picked up her box. She walked to the door, then stopped. "David?" "Yes." "That night. In the car. Why, I told you to wait." "I know," I said. "You were ashamed of me. No, she said, her voice breaking. I was ashamed of myself. I knew I didn't belong in that world. I knew I was a fraud. And looking at you, looking at how real you were, it made me feel smaller. So I tried to make you small too. She looked down at the floor. I'm sorry I didn't see you, David. I was too busy looking in the mirror. She opened the door and walked out. I watched the door close. The silence returned to the office. I picked up the ID badge she had left on the desk. It had her photo on it, smiling, confident, ambitious. A ghost of a person who no longer existed. I dropped the badge into the trash can. It was done. The final thread was cut. I turned my chair toward the window. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the city. The lights of Chicago were flickering on, one by one, a sea of potential and indifference. I had the company. I had the power. I had the truth. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, I realized that the victory was cold. It was necessary, yes. It was just, but it was cold. I pressed the intercom button. Sarah? Yes, Mr. Harper. Order me a car, I said, and clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. Where are you going, sir? I'm going to the site, I said. To the lab. I need to see if we can actually build something real out of this mess. Understood, sir. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I walked out of the office, leaving the empty desk behind. The architect had demolished the ruins. Now it was time to design something that would stand, something that wouldn't crumble when the wind changed. I walked to the elevator alone, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I was moving forward. The descent was smooth. The lobby was bright. The automatic doors opened into the night. And I stepped out, not into the cold, but into the fresh, biting air of a new season.